Zola Skweyiya and the children, the Mabuza family, former President Thabo Mbeki and Usis Zanel, members of the executive in our midst, members of the judiciary, family and friends of Dr. Zola Skweyiya. Fellow South Africans, ladies and gentlemen, this past Saturday, our country hosted the world in laying to rest one of our revolutionary stalwarts, Winnie Mandela. Hardly a week, we are here paying our last respect to another giant of our struggle, Dr. Zola Skweyiya. With his passing, our country has lost a fine revolutionary, an upright human being, and a true servant of our people. As a nation, and the African National Congress in particular, we are cognizant of the reality that this period marks a critical turning point in our political history. It is time when we are losing the generation of outstanding leaders that made an immense contribution to our freedom. In this hour of grief and loss, we find comfort that Dr. Skweyiya leaves a rich legacy behind for all of us to emulate. Throughout his life, he performed extraordinary feats because he was driven by a deep sense of social justice, care and love of his people. It was his deep hatred for racial oppression and injustice that inspired his lifelong activism. Dr. Zola Skweyiya was a very loyal cadre of the ANC. He was a deep thinker and a very rational person, and yet disciplined in his own conduct and in understanding the ANC and its reputation. As a loyal member of the ANC, he gave absolute loyalty and obedience to the leadership of his organization. But he was also an independent person, but careful nonetheless as to how he expressed himself amongst his own comrades. He was a very humble person, yet very steadfast in his principles. In valuing integrity, truth, and selflessness, he became an embodiment of servant leadership and a shining light for the destitute and marginalized of our country and the world. Trained as a lawyer, he understood the power of law as an instrument of effecting political change and advancing justice and equality. As a cabinet minister, his work was really pioneering. The many strides that we made as a country, especially on the enjoyment, promotion, and protection of basic human rights, as provided for in our Constitution, are partly due to Dr. Skweyiya's contribution and personal drive and conviction. He succeeded in serving our nation with distinction because of his love for the people was authentic. His enthusiasm for their dreams and aspiration was unsurpassed. As a living personification of fairness and justice, his demeanor exemplified a special sensitivity to the needs of the most vulnerable amongst ourselves. Because of his passion for life and deep love for his people, he became a revolutionary cadre par excellence. He epitomized a cadre of unquestionable loyalty and dedication to his people. In 1985, Oliver Tambo, whom he worked with for many years in exile, must have had in mind a good human being of the caliber of Dr. Skweyiya when he said, I quote, "The distinctive feature of the revolutionary cadre, its high level of discipline, dedication, and courage in carrying out the task assigned by the movement. Such cadres are guided by our goal of a united, non-racial, and democratic South Africa." Close quote. Dr. Skweyiya placed the integrity of the organization above all else. In executing his responsibilities, he understood that his very actions will always be mirrored against what the ANC stands for. And for this reason, his revolutionary morality always took central stage of his life and conduct. He belongs to the generation of leaders whose very being and preoccupation was nothing else but service to our people. His life of activism and revolutionary struggle for our freedom, as well as his life in public service, is papered with nothing other than conviction, compassion, and selflessness. In all likelihood, these traits and character of Dr. Skweyiya were shaped by his early years at Lovedale as a young student activist, as we have heard. Lovedale was one of the historic mission schools that became an influential center of education in South Africa. It was the heartbeat of political thought, leadership, and activism. As the hotbed of the politics of resistance, it produced prominent names in the political and intellectual history of South Africa. Among those who came from there and were among great leaders like Comrade Chris Hani, Comrade Thabo Mbeki, Comrade Paulo Jordan, just to name a few. Today I've heard that Comrade Charles also was part of those who were there in that school. This generation of leaders remains the finest that our movement has ever produced. Here, students always participated in campaigns of the Congress movement, the boycotts and delegation of young people. Looking at this generation of young activists at the time, it is not surprising that Dr. Skweyiya was soon immersed in the politics of the African National Congress, which he died a member of. He proceeded to pursue his tertiary education at the University College of Fort Hare, which was another center of intellectual, academic, and political life in our country. In this period, between 1961 and 1964, was one of the intense repression moments in our country. The escalation of the politics of resistance led to the Rivonia trial. The banning of our organization and many liberation organizations led directly to the establishment of the armed struggle. Together with his generation of young activists, Comrade Zola was among those pioneering cadres who left the country and established the external mission of the ANC and Umkhonto weSizwe. In 1978, Dr. Skweyiya obtained a doctorate in law in the then German Democratic Republic. He became the chief representative of the ANC to the Organization of African Unity in Addis, which is where he honed his diplomatic skills. A lot has been said about his role. After many years in Addis Ababa, the ANC appointed him to head the Legal and Constitutional Department, which a lot has been said about it. And thanks to all those comrades who served with him. This was during a very sensitive time in the life of the ANC in exile. It was the time when large numbers of young people post-1976 swelled the ranks of the ANC. By so doing, the armed wing of the ANC, Umkhonto weSizwe, got a new lease of life. It was also the decade of fierce internal resistance in the country, and the ANC president's call then to make South Africa ungovernable was receiving an enthusiastic support in the country. It was the time when the struggle, both internally and externally, combined to exert pressure on the apartheid regime. Inevitably, it was also the time when the apartheid agents infiltrated the ANC at the camps and elsewhere. Responses to this and the need for discipline were increased within the ANC. The then president of the ANC, Oliver Tambo, entrusted Dr. Skweyiya to lead the ANC's efforts at establishing a culture of human rights, maintenance of the rule of law even within the ANC camps, and ultimately an investigation was undertaken in order to root out any violation within the ranks. This very sensitive task was handled by Comrade Zola with all the dignity and understanding. He was known to be the one who investigated all complaints. Later, he was entrusted with the duty to establish the ANC his own commission on the Constitution as we prepared to come back home. Upon his return to South Africa in 1990, he played a pivotal role in the negotiations for a democratic South Africa. When the ANC got into power, we had inherited a very fragmented, unaccountable governance system that consisted of separate administration for different racial groups. As our first democratic public service and administration minister, he championed the cause for a developmental state. A lot has been said about this assignment. It was under his sterling leadership that our government began restructuring that fragmented public service into an instrument of transformation. It should not be lost in our memory that we inherited a public service that was skewed, meant to serve few people. It was under Dr. Skweyiya that we began reshaping the public service and administration into a single one that serves all South Africans with dignity. Our archives show that by the time we came into power, there were few female leaders in the whole of the public service. It was under him that we began to actively recruit women into senior and top management positions in the public service. That early transformation period also means that Dr. Skweyiya had to build a united, a non-racial, very efficient, ethical public service to replace a public service whose composition and content had characterized the corruption of the apartheid state. He remained motivated by the ideals of inclusion and tolerance. That is why there were no witch hunts, no paging of skilled, experienced personnel. Later, as Minister of Social Development, his concern for the poor and the downtrodden was evident. He worked tirelessly to ensure that the dignity of the recipients of social support from the state were respected and honored. When he championed an expanded social protection program, he understood that this intervention was not an end in itself. To him, it was one whose importance lay in bringing hope to the destitute of our people. He understood that even though the road to total emancipation of our people was long, they needed to have faith that their own government would not forsake them. Consistently humble, yet straightforwardly fearless to defend the rights of the elderly and children. He understood the plight of the poor and could easily relate to its nature and form. Dr. Skweyiya understood that the arrogance of leadership serves no purpose in the advancement of people's hope and aspiration, but a source of social distance and an evil seed for trust deficit. To best honor the legacy of this gentle giant of our struggle for freedom, we must agree that arrogance of leadership must give way to humility. The loss of our stalwart is as painful as the loss of one's piece of the body, and we are poorer without his presence, we are poorer without his wisdom. He leaves a very rich legacy of intellectual rigor, of social activism, is truly a man of honor. For our part, we must acknowledge where we veered off the road and did not do things the right way. Dr. Skweyiya detested cliques and factions and was known always to stand above all such formations within the ranks. He expressed uneasiness with the development in the South African government. So concerned was he that he lent his support to the community of stalwarts and veterans of the ANC and was a signatory to their document entitled "For the Sake of Our Future." At the sunset of his life, with such a stand, he lamented that we need leaders of this beloved movement to tone down their hostility. He despised the purging of comrades by dominant factions within the movement, and he bemoaned gatekeeping, disunity, and corruption. Together with other veterans, a door was shut for him to openly engage on issues of concern at the time. As the leadership, our preoccupation with our own sense of insecurity rendered him and other veterans invisible. Still, he placed his hopes in the general membership of this organization. He kept the faith that in the branches, brave and courageous men and women will be awakened to renew and unite this organization of ours and our country. As we mourn his passing, we wish to assure his spirit and the entirety of the veterans of the ANC that we regret some of the omissions we have committed ourselves in the service of our people. Want to assure his spirit that the organization he so loved and dedicated his entire adult life to is on an irreversible path of renewal as the true and honest servant of our people. As our journey to the healing of wounds take us to other departed stalwarts of our movement, like Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Chris Hani, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, Govan Mbeki, Alfred Nzo, we surrender to their grace and care, the hand of their comrade in arms, Dr. Zola Skweyiya. We trust they will give him the comradely embrace he might have missed from us as his comrades. We hope they will find a way of telling him that we heard his cry, we felt the pain of a distinguished veteran who dedicated his life to this organization, the African National Congress. We finally felt the pain of a towering patriot whose disappointed stay spoke volumes about how, as leaders, had forsaken our sincerity, how we have forgotten our mission, and in the process had gone astray. We heard and saw his frustration about a leadership that had become blind to the suffering of the people and became deaf to the cries of our society. Until the end of time, he maintained his faith in the unity of the working class and its ability to organize itself to reclaim its movement to advance a pro-poor program of fundamental social change. Yet in his tone and gesture, we still found a measured human being embodying revolutionary discipline, humility, and respect for those he disagreed with. Even late in his life, he remained stern in appearance and tone, but caring and compassionate in attitude. He might have been disappointed, but he was not bitter and paralyzed. Perhaps losing hope at times, but certainly never despairing. In honor of his memory, the veterans and stalwarts of the ANC should never again feel they are treated with disdain and respect and disrespect. We'll jealously guard our cohesion as a democratic state and at all times the unity of our movement. We will protect the gains we have made in protecting the interests, in promoting the interests of the poor. We will continue to improve the quality of service delivery to our people. We have no doubt that Dr. Skweyiya's departure in this world, he was satisfied of the progress that we have made as government in the provision of the many services that our people need. In the provision of houses, in the provision of water, sanitation, electricity, we have made progress, but we are not there yet. We will not cease to work to place the people first in the workings of our government. We will always care for the destitute and ensure that no one is left behind and no child goes to bed hungry. We shall continue to pursue the vision of attaining a united, non-racial, non-sexist, just and a prosperous society. This is what the African National Congress stands for. On the passing on of Dr. Skweyiya must rise a unique moment, the kind that Amika Cabral termed the constructive emulation. As he explained, Cabral meant competition, but for the well-being, not for the stomach, for us to serve our party and our people. Our country needs new cadres within this constructive emulation who will work to undo one another in the service of our people. We need to undo one another in compassion, in love, and support for one another, just as Dr. Skweyiya and various others selflessly did for all of us, paying a huge sacrifice on our behalf. In his memory, our young people must always live in hope that in this giant, they have inherited a country that is filled with many possibilities. Their access to free education opens doors for all to pursue their dreams in the fields of their choices. In his name and in the name of our hard-earned democracy, we must condemn the continuing violence against women and children and the ill-treatment of our older persons. As a champion of social development, this is the vision that this icon of our struggle and the servant of our people held so dear in his heart. To the Skweyiya family, please receive again our heartfelt condolences. May the good Lord save you from unending sorrow and keep you in the palm of his hand. May you gain strength even in this difficult hour of pain. Want to thank the family for sharing this gentle giant with all of us and for allowing him to serve humanity in the best way that he could. To Oliver Tambo, as you hold Dr. Skweyiya's hand tightly, may you whisper to his caring ear the Irish blessing. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, the rain fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. We salute you, gentle giant of our struggle for freedom. May your revolutionary soul rest in peace. Thank you very much.